merchant fleet drifted through the silent stretch of Sector E-49. Its captains relaxed after days of uneventful travel. Most of the crew were half asleep at their stations, their eyes on dim consoles and half-finished drinks. The space here was quiet, far from the trade hubs, far from any danger. That quiet ended when the first blip appeared on the long-range scanners. At first it looked like a small moon moving unnaturally slow, casting no light of its own, reflecting only faint glimmers from the nearest star. The fleet's navigator frowned, adjusting the readout, thinking it was a glitch. But the shape remained. On the screen it was massive. It's bigger than anything a civilian ship could be, and it was moving. The shape had no transponder code, no registry, no signal of any kind. The captains of the fleet opened a private channel, their voices low, their words unsure. Some thought it was an asteroid. Others thought it might be a derelict battleship from an old war. No one wanted to get closer. Then the camera zoomed in, and the silence on the channel turned into gasps. What they saw was not rock, and it was not a natural body. The shape was metal, its dark hull broken only by the faint glint of armor plates, and the shadows of structures that could only be weapon mounts. It was too symmetrical to be anything but a ship. A big ship, the biggest any of them had ever seen. It moved with a slow, steady crawl, as if it had no reason to rush, as if time itself bent around it. Rumors started in the fleet instantly. Some said it was a relic from the First Galactic War. Others whispered it might be a ghost ship, crewed by machines or worse. A young deckhand swore she had seen its design once, in an old war archive, but no one believed her. Still, the unease spread. The ship had no name on its hull, no markings, nothing to claim it belonged to anyone in the known galaxy. And yet its presence felt heavy, like it belonged to the battlefield more than the stars around it. Somewhere far away, news networks picked up the fleet's transmissions and began broadcasting the sighting live. Screens across multiple systems lit up with the image of the dark shape drifting through the void. Audiences stared, their curiosity mixing with a creeping sense of dread. In the merchant fleet, a few captains urged caution and a change of course. But before they could decide, the massive ship shifted its trajectory ever so slightly, its nose now pointing toward the fleet. The movement was smooth, deliberate, and without any visible thrust. It was as if the ship simply decided to move, and the universe obeyed. Panic rippled through the crews. Engines flared, shields went up, and voices shouted over each other on the comms. The ship did not speed up, but its approach was relentless. One freighter tried to send a hailing signal. There was no response. Another ship attempted to scan but the sensors failed, throwing back static and false readings as if the target was swallowing their signals. Then, without warning, the fleet's comms were drowned in a deep, resonating sound. It was not a normal transmission. It was a single low-frequency pulse that seemed to vibrate in the bones of everyone who heard it. The words, if they were words, were too distorted to understand. Came again, slightly clearer, and the fleet's translators struggled to piece it together. It was a voice, a human voice. "Stand by, humanity." That was all it said before cutting off. The merchant fleet froze. Humanity was a name that belonged to history books and war stories. The humans had been gone for decades, their fleets lost or destroyed in the last war anyone could remember. Most people in the galaxy had never even seen one in person. The stories about them painted them as dangerous, impossible, and unwilling to lose. The thought that one of their ships sift, this truly was human, was out here in the middle of nowhere was almost too much to believe. Yet the evidence floated in the dark before them, silent after its brief message. One of the braver captains, a grizzled old trader with more scars than hair, ordered his ship closer. The others tried to stop him, warning him that legends were dangerous because they usually had a reason to be feared. His ship edged forward, closing the distance slowly. The giant ship loomed larger and larger in the viewport until it filled the entire frame. The surface was scarred in places, but the scars were shallow, as if whatever had struck it had only scratched the paint. The closer he got, the more certain he became that this was no ordinary vessel. Then something shifted along the hull. Faint seams sliding open. The merchant captain's breath caught as a hatch yawned wide in the darkness. From that black gap, shapes emerged. Not machines, not drones, but figures. Tall armored soldiers stepped out onto the hull, their glowing visors cutting through the void. They moved with precision, each step calculated, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. The merchant captain's voice was a whisper over the fleet channel. They are not dead. The human war machine is awake, and it is looking right at us. The massive ship hung in the dark like a sleeping predator, its armored surface glinting faintly under the distant starlight. The figures that had stepped out onto the hull stood completely still, watching the merchant fleet from afar. Their glowing visors were the only light in that void, and for a long moment no one moved, no one spoke. Then one of the soldiers raised a hand to the side of their helmet, and the low, deep pulse returned to the combs. This time the voice was clearer, still cold and mechanical, but with an edge of something alive beneath it. "Stand by, humanity," it repeated. The translation systems across the fleet confirmed it. It was no mistake. The merchant ships fell into a tense silence. No one dared to fire, no one dared to flee, though every instinct screamed to run. The humans had vanished from the galaxy 80 years ago, after a war that had left entire systems burning. Many thought them extinct. The rest thought they had gone into hiding, waiting for a reason to return. No one had ever expected that reason to be here now. In the middle of an empty trade route, the fleet's senior captain, a wide-eyed man named Corin, activated a secure channel to the sector patrol. His voice shook as he sent a short message. "Unknown warship, possible human origin. Request immediate military presence." The reply came back almost instantly, confused voices, asking for confirmation, asking if this was some kind of joke. But the live feed from the fleet shut them up. The warship was real. The galaxy's long-forgotten nightmare was real. Within an hour, fast response corvette from the local defense force appeared at the edge of the sector, engines burning hot. The corvette's commander, a seasoned officer with decades of patrol experience, opened a public hail to the massive ship. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself and your purpose in this sector." Silence. He tried again, firmer. "You are entering controlled space. Respond immediately." Still nothing. Sensors swept over the ship, but the readings came back scrambled. Like the data was being bent out of shape. The commander frowned and ordered the corvette to close the distance. As soon as the corvette came within 100 kilometers, its lights flickered. Screens went black. Power died across the ship, one system after another shutting down until only emergency lights remained. Over the fleet's open channel came the startled voices of the corvette crew. "We've lost navigation. Engines. Offline shields not responding." The commander's voice was tight. "Something's inside our systems, like it knows exactly what to kill." The merchant fleet watched in stunned silence as the corvette drifted powerless. And still the human supercarrier did not move. Then, as if granting mercy, the deep voice rolled across the combs again. This time it spoke more words, slow and deliberate, each syllable carrying the weight of authority. "You are in the presence of HSS Titanborn. Stand down. This is not your war." The name sent a shiver through the older captains in the fleet. They had heard it before in fragments of war stories and classified reports from the last human conflict. Titanborn was the largest and deadliest supercarrier ever built by the humans. A ship so feared that entire enemy fleets had surrendered rather than face it. According to history, Titanborn had been destroyed during the final battles. And yet here it was, floating in front of them, whole and untouched. Back aboard Titanborn, the human crew moved through its massive corridors with mechanical precision. Most of them were encased in armor, their faces hidden behind dark visors. In the command center, a tall man with streaks of silver in his hair stood at the central console, his eyes fixed on a holographic map of the sector. "We've been found," he said calmly. A younger officer nodded. "Orders, Captain?" The man's gaze didn't waver from the map. "Proceed to coordinates from the signal." The officer hesitated. "Sir, that's in the Sharath expanse." The captain finally looked at him, a faint trace of a smile touching his lips. Then we're going to the Shirath Expanse. Back outside, the Titanburn's massive engines rumbled to life for the first time in decades. The sound alone shook the merchant fleet's ships. Slowly, the Supercarrier began to turn, its bulk moving with impossible grace for its size. The alien corvette systems flickered back on as the humans seemed to lose interest in them. Without another word, Titanborn accelerated away, its sheer mass warping the space around it. The merchant captains could only watch as the monster slipped into the distance, growing smaller until it was nothing but a shadow in the dark.
Aye.
Then broke the silence over the coms. If that really is the Titanborn, then someone has woken a legend. And legends don't wake without reason. In a hidden control room somewhere light years away, the sector military leaders stared at the footage in disbelief, their voices low as they tried to understand. And on dozens of alien worlds, civilians watched the recordings over and over, their fear mixing with a strange fascination. No one knew where the Titanborn was going. No one knew what it wanted. But one thing was certain, wherever it was headed. The galaxy was about to remember why it had feared the humans in the first place. Inside the vast corridors of the HSS Titanborn, the air was thick with the faint hum of ancient machinery. The ship's interior was dim, lit only by narrow strips of cold white light running along the walls. Human soldiers moved with steady purpose, their boots echoing in the steel halls. Each one wore heavy armor, black as the void outside, their weapons slung at their sides. The crew spoke little, their discipline absolute, as though every one of them already knew what was coming. In the command center, the captain stood before a massive display, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. A single red mark pulsed. In the middle of a shadowed region, its name, in faded letters, was the Shirath Expanse. Around him, officers checked systems that had not been touched in decades, bringing the ship's ancient war machines to life. Massive hangar doors groaned as fighters and gunships powered on, their engines growling like beasts eager for release. The Titanborn had been asleep for a long time, hidden far from the eyes of the galaxy, but its crew had never left. They were a sleeper unit, preserved in deep stasis for years, waiting for the signal. And now, that signal had come? The captain's second-in command, Commander Vale, stepped to his side. The coordinates are confirmed. Signal originated from inside the expanse. The captain didn't look away from the map. Survivors. Vale hesitated. Unknown. The distress call was encrypted military-grade, old Human Alliance format. It shouldn't even be possible for anyone outside our command chain to use it. That made the captain pause. The only way such a code could be broadcast was if there was still a human unit out there, or someone had found something they weren't meant to. Set course, the captain ordered. Full burn. We're not here to negotiate. The expanse has been breached. We contain it. As Titanborn surged through the black, the crew prepared for war. Weapons crews loaded heavy cannons with shells the size of small ships. Missile silos opened for the first time in 80 years, their payloads still gleaming. Deep in the lower decks, engineers checked the systems that powered the carriers. Most feared weapon, one so destructive it had only been fired twice in history. Every man and woman aboard knew the stories. They were the ship that had broken the siege of Helion, that had destroyed the Graal Dominion's flagship in a single strike, that had vanished into legend after the war. Now, the legend was moving. Again, far from the Titanburn's path, the galaxy buzzed with panic and curiosity. Alien news channels replayed the first encounter over and over, dissecting every detail. Analysts argued over whether the humans were returning to reclaim lost territory or to start another war. Some politicians called for immediate alliances, others for fleets to intercept the humans before they reached their destination. Civilian chatter was different. On crowded station streets and across digital forums, one phrase began to spread: the Deathworlders are awake. Meanwhile, deep in the Shirath Expanse, something stirred. In the dark heart of the region, far from any civilized world, a fleet of jagged black ships hung in orbit around a ruined planet. Their hulls were etched with strange symbols, their weapons bristling with alien technology that no one outside their species truly understood. These were the Verkral Dominion, the predators of the expanse, rulers of a territory that had been off limits for centuries. The Dominion's warlords had not heard the name Titanborn in living memory, and they did not fear what they did not know. To them, the distress call was bait trap to lure and prey. But one old warlord, his body scarred and his eyes dim with age, felt something colder. He remembered the last war. He remembered the humans. Back aboard Titanborn, the captain sat alone in his quarters, looking at an old photograph. It was faded, its edges worn from decades of being carried through battles. In it, a younger version of himself stood with a squad of soldiers in front of the Titanborn's bow. Most of them were gone now, lost to the war or the long silence. After, he set the picture down gently, then tapped the console on his desk. To all hands, his voice echoed through the ship's intercom. Calm but firm, we are entering hostile space. The distress call we received was not a mistake. We are the only ones who can answer it. Stand ready. Whatever waits for us in the expanse, we end it. The engines roared louder, and the stars outside the viewport stretched into streaks of light as the Titanborn plunged toward the unknown. The galaxy could only watch and wonder. Somewhere ahead, in the deep shadow of the expanse, an ancient enemy was waking too. And when the two finally met, there would be no room for witnesses. Survivors. The Shirath expanse had no stars to welcome travelers, only a vast sea of darkness where even light seemed reluctant to exist. As the HSS Titanborn crossed the boundary, its sensors came alive with alerts. Faint energy signatures pulsed in the distance, scattered like shark fins beneath black water. Commander Vale studied the readings with narrowed eyes. Multiple vessels ahead. Dominion warships, she reported. The captain didn't flinch. How many? Vale hesitated. Our scans are correct. More than 50. A low murmur rippled through the command deck, but the captain's voice was steady. Then this will be quick, the Verkral. Dominion had been watching since the moment Titanborn breached the expanse. From the shadows of drifting asteroid fortresses, their ships shifted into formation. Sleek, jagged cruisers and hulking dreadnoughts glided forward like predators drawn to fresh blood. The largest of them, the warship Skroth's Claw, sent out a wideband transmission in their guttural tongue. The message was short and filled. With contempt, leave, or be dismantled. And the humans didn't respond. Titanborn simply continued forward, massive and silent. The kind of silence that felt heavier than any threat. The Dominion fleet moved to intercept. One dreadnought surged ahead, its weapon ports glowing with the heat of a charged plasma lance. A volley of emerald fire streaked toward Titanborn, but before the blast could reach its target, a wall of shimmering light erupted from the Supercarrier's side. The energy absorbed the attack like rain striking an ocean, dispersing it into harmless ripples. Without a word from the captain, Titanborn's portside batteries answered. Dozens of railguns fired in unison, each shot a burning spear of metal. Traveling at impossible speed, the dreadnought didn't have time to raise its shields before it was torn apart, its fragments spinning away into the dark. The rest of the Dominion fleet hesitated, just for a heartbeat. And that heartbeat was enough for Titanborn's hangars to open. From the massive bays poured wings of smaller human warships, sleek destroyers, and agile strike craft, their black holes patterned with faint blue lights. The merchant fleets. Recordings of the moment would later be replayed across the galaxy. An ocean of human firepower. Spilling into space like a storm unleashed, alien news anchors whispered the words that would grip entire worlds. The Deathworlders are back. The Verkral regrouped quickly, launching swarms of fighters to meet the humans head-on. Space erupted into chaos. Bright streaks of plasma. The sharp trails of missile contrails and the flash of explosions lit the black void. The humans moved with cold precision, their formations shifting fluidly to cut apart the enemy wings. On the command deck of Skroth's Claw, the Verkral, Warlord roared orders, but his eyes betrayed unease. These were not the slow, cautious fleets of other species. This was coordinated slaughter. Inside Titanborn, the captain watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. Every enemy move was anticipated, every gap in their defense exploited. Target their command ships, he ordered quietly. Break their teeth before they can bite. The forward batteries rotated, and a thunderous barrage ripped into the heart of the Dominion formation. One by one, the larger Verkral cruisers went dark, drifting powerless before detonating under secondary strikes. But the humans were not using their full might. Titanburn's most feared weapon, the one spoken of only in hushed tones, remained dormant. Commander Vale noticed. "Sir," she said cautiously, "if we engage the main gun, we can end this now." The captain's gaze stayed fixed on the censure. "Display, not yet. Let them understand what they face before we end it." As the Dominion fleet's losses mounted, panic began to spread among their ranks. Transmissions filled with static-laced shouts were intercepted by Titanburn's comms orders to retreat, to regroup, to warn the homeworld. The captain heard them all, his expression unreadable. Then, at last, he gave the order. "Planet Killer." The word sent a visible shiver through the bridge crew. Deep within Titanborn, enormous armored panels slid open to reveal a weapon older than most civilizations. Energy crackled along its barrel as ancient capacitors roared. To life, the humans called it the Ragnarok Cannon, and in the old war, it had ended entire campaigns in a single shot. Now, as the weapon locked on to the Dominion's forward base in the expanse, the Verkral warlord finally understood the danger. His voice, once defiant, now carried the first traces of fear. "Shut them down. All ships. Fire everything." But it was too late. Titanburn's main gun unleashed a beam of pure, blinding light that tore through space itself. The Verkral base vanished in a silent flare, reduced to nothing in the time it took to blink. The shockwave rippled outward, scattering debris, and sending enemy ships spinning helplessly. Silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the fading static of dying comm channels. Titanborn didn't pursue the survivors. The captain gave no victory speech, no threat. The humans simply began to turn, their fleets pulling back toward the next set of coordinates. To the onlookers watching across the galaxy, the message was clear. This battle had not been the war. This had only been the first warning. The fires of the Verkral base still burned in the void as the HSS Titanborn advanced deeper into the expanse. The destruction it had left behind was visible for light minutes, a glowing wound against the black. Survivors from the Dominion? Fleet limped away, their shattered ships vanishing into the shadows, but none dared to follow. The humans had made their point, and everyone understood it. Still, Titanborn did not slow. Its engines burned hot, carrying it toward the heart of enemy space, the fortress world of Shirath Prime. Shirath Prime had been untouchable for centuries. The planet was wrapped in a network of orbital defense rings, each bristling with weapon, platforms, missile silos, and shield generators the size of cities. The Verkral had built it to be impenetrable, a throne from which they could rule the expanse without fear of attack. No foreign fleet had ever reached its skies. The thought that anyone might try was laughable till now. In Titanburn's hangars, pilots strapped into their strike craft, running final checks on weapons and shields. Each pilot knew the risk. Shirath Prime was a fortress built for slaughtering fleets, but their orders were simple. Disable the orbital defenses, pave the way for Titanburn's guns. On the bridge, Commander Vale studied the tactical readout. "Their planetary shield network is already cycling to full power," she reported. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Then we hit them before it locks." The first wave launched, a swarm of fighters and bombers streaking through the void in tight formation. Verkral interceptors surged up from the planet's defense rings, their engines flaring with the heat of full pursuit. In seconds, the sky above Shirath Prime became a storm of light. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the darkness, missiles spiraled toward their targets, and ships on both sides fell in burning arcs. But the humans pressed forward relentlessly. Fighter wings dove straight into the enemy formations, drawing fire away from the bombers until they were close enough to drop there. Payloads' explosions tore open the orbital rings, sending fragments spinning into the atmosphere. On the planet below, civilians looked up from the streets to see fire streaking across the sky. Most had never seen a battle this close, and fear swept through the cities like a tide. The Verkral leadership, confident in their shields, watched. From their hardened command bunkers, their expressions shifted from smug certainty to cold shock as Titan Burn's main batteries opened fire. The Supercarrier's shots were precise, each one aimed at shield emitters identified by human scouts. The energy barriers flickered, sputtered, and then collapsed entirely in one section. Titanborn seized the opening, all forward guns full. "Power," the captain ordered. The ship's forward cannons roared, ripping into the exposed defenses. Entire defense platforms crumbled under the barrage, their twisted wreckage tumbling toward the planet's surface. The Verkral fleet tried to regroup, launching a desperate counterattack, but the humans intercepted them with frightening efficiency. Strike craft cut through the enemy's formation, blasting apart cruisers before they could even fire. Within hours, the once invincible Fortress World's defenses were in ruins.
Ow.
The Verkral commanders sent frantic transmissions to their allies, pleading for reinforcements, but most never reached their destination. Titanburn's jamming systems silenced the sky, leaving Shirath Prime isolated. In the command bunker, the warlord who ruled the planet finally understood the truth. The humans weren't here to conquer the expanse. They were here to send a message. On the bridge of Titanborn, Commander Vale glanced at the captain. "Sir, their capital city is within range. Do we strike?" Captain's gaze was cold, calculating, negative. This is a warning, not an extermination. He ordered a new transmission sent broadband, unencrypted, meant for every sensor in the system to hear. The voice that followed was deep and steady, the same one that had shaken the merchant fleet days ago. "We woke because the galaxy cried for help. We will leave when the threat is gone. Stand down or face extinction." Every living being on Shirath Prime heard it. The message echoed through streets, across military channels, even into the deepest bunkers. The humans had fought their way through impossible defenses, crushed a world's pride, and left it standing not out of mercy, but as a final chance to obey. And then, just as quickly as they had arrived, Titanburn's fleets began to pull away. From the surface, civilians watched as the colossal ship drifted back into the dark, its silhouette swallowing the starlight. To the Verkral leadership, it was not retreat, it was a promise. Somewhere in the distance, the humans would be waiting, and if the Dominion ever gave them reason, they would return. In the silence that followed, the galaxy began to buzz. On every world with access to a cum feed, people whispered the same thing: the humans had returned, and this was only the beginning. In the days that followed the siege of Shirath Prime, the galaxy could not stop talking about the human supercarrier. Every broadcast, every news feed, every whispered conversation in crowded spaceports carried the same name: Titanborn. Grainy. Recordings of the battles spread like wildfire: the destruction of the Verkral fleet, the collapse of the planetary shields, the moment the humans delivered their warning. On worlds far from the expanse, people who had never seen a warship in their lives replayed those clips again and again, fascinated and afraid. The Deathworlders were no longer just old stories, they were real, and they were moving through the stars once more. On Titanburn's bridge, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. The great ship had slipped away from Shirath's space without pursuit. No one dared to follow them. The captain stood at the main viewport, watching the streaking lights of slipstream travel. "How far to the signal's origin?" he asked, "Commander." Vale checked her console. 3 days at current speed. The captain gave a single nod. Whatever had sent that distress call was still ahead of them, somewhere in the deepest shadows of the galaxy. In the war rooms of half a dozen alien governments, the footage from Shirath Prime was studied with growing unease. Some leaders saw opportunity. If the humans could be persuaded into alliance, their fleets could be unstoppable. Others saw only danger, fearing that the same guns that leveled the expanse could one day turn on them. Debates raged, fleets were put on alert, old treaties were quietly reviewed. And all the while, the Verkral Dominion licked its wounds. Their pride was shattered, their forces crippled, yet their hatred burned hotter than ever. Secretly, they began to gather allies who shared their fear of the humans, preparing for the day they would strike back. 3 days later, Titanborn dropped out of slipstream at the edge of a dead system. The star at its center was little more than a cold ember, its planets dark and lifeless. And yet the distress signal pulsed here, faint but steady. "We've found it," Vale said softly. On the scanners, the source appeared as a derelict. Stationed drifting above the remains of a shattered moon, its hull was torn open in multiple places, the damage old but deliberate. Titanborn closed in slowly, guns tracking the shadows. When the boarding teams entered the station, they found only silence. Long empty corridors echoed with their footsteps. The air was stale, the lights dead. Yet deep inside the structure, in a sealed command chamber, they found the transmitter still active, an ancient human military beacon. Decades old, its systems barely holding together. Beside it lay a single armored body, slumped over the console. The armor marked with the insignia of the Human Alliance. The soldier had died sending the call. The captain stood over the body in silence. After a long moment, he reached down and removed the old identification tag from the soldier's neck. "We came," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to the dead. "We heard you." Then he turned to his officers. "Prepare a burial, and wipe the beacon. No one else needs to follow this trail." When Titanborn departed the system, it left no sign it had ever been there, but the galaxy would not forget. The humans had returned to the stars with power undiminished, their will unbroken. They had fought a battle against one of the strongest powers in the sector and left without loss. To some, it was hope. To others, a warning, before vanishing into the black. Titanborn sent one last transmission, broadcast across every major relay in known space. The voice was calm, commanding, and final. "We woke because you called for help. We will sleep again when the galaxy is safe. Do not give us reason to wake sooner." Then, just like that, the Supercarrier was gone, slipping into the void where no sensors could follow, leaving only silence and the uneasy knowledge that somewhere, out in the darkness, the Deathworlders were watching.